As most of you know, I've been out touring the country talking about my new book, The Unexpected Light of Thomas Alva Edison. Recently, I visited the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California. I sat down with the chief marketing officer at the library, Melissa Giller, to discuss the book, the first of my Turnabout Tales series. Here's a bit of that conversation.
I think your first foray into books for young adults was the Will Wilder series.
Yes.
And then you moved to books for children and families around the holidays with religious messages. And now we are here for historical figures. So what made you think to do a children or family book specifically on historical figures?
I love that you call it a family book, because people, I think crudely refer to these books as picture books. I never call them picture books. I call them family reads. And what I discovered is, look, I stumbled upon this story. This was just a kind of, someone had given me one of those big, great Edison biographies, and I'll be honest, like you, it sat on my shelf. It was a collector of dust. But one day I decided to pick it up and take it on vacation with me, and I read sometimes from the back of the book to the front. So I flipped to the last chapter, and there was an interview with elder Edison when he's an old man. And in the interview, he says, "My mother was the making of me. She allowed me to follow my bent, and but for her faith and devotion to me, at a certain time in my life, I should never have become an inventor." And I thought, wait a minute, who is this mother? Why is he talking about her in these terms? And that biography didn't really explore that part of the story. So that began for me a 4-month journey that took me to the Edison Labs in West Orange, Dearborn, Michigan. I read, I don't know how many biographies, and I discovered and unearthed this little bit of Edison's story that I think is the heart of his story, which is a mother's devotion who saw possibility in her son where the world saw nothing at all. Even his own father called him a dunce. So it was a great story I thought kids and families needed access to. So and then as I read these other great American lives, and not even American lives, young lives of great people, you quickly realize they all have what I like to term a turnabout tale. A moment when a crisis is faced, a challenge is faced, a decision is made, and history turns. And so I'm devoting myself to writing a series of these family reads that focus and frame the story as a turnabout tale. So that's kind of, the big picture, and now we can burrow into.
No, this is great. So, and my children are 20 and 23, and I still found this book, and I still found this book fascinating. But it leads to my next question in that, yes, it's a family read, but do you have a target age range for these books?
Well, I write for 2 audiences, and this really applies to all of my books, for young people, families. I try to write for the child today and the child tomorrow when they're reading to their own children, because that's the kind of books that excited me. I mean, Jungle Book and Treasure Island and Peter Pan and all those stories that my mother read to me, when I read them to my own children, they moved. They shift on you. Good literature has a way of kind of shifting on you. And it's not moving, you are. We as adults perceive things in a different way. So there are themes and characters and moments that you miss as a child that when you hit them as an adult, the lights suddenly go on. So I write, this book too is written on 2 levels. There is a story in the foreground for the child. And look, Edison, he was a curious kid. So I told the illustrator, I told my publisher, I really want to lean into the experiments and the curious things he did to find out how the world worked. He wanted to find out how bees made honey. So he cracked open a honeycomb. He just busted them open. Well, you imagine the bees went everywhere. I mean, this is not, a calm way to approach, study of bees. He wanted to learn how fire worked. So he set a little blaze in the corner of his dad's barn, burned the whole farm down. It wasn't a kind of, but if you visit these moments for kids, they're fascinated by it. That kind of tactile experience. And in the background is really the story of a mother and her son that I think, judging from the letters and the notes and the response I've gotten on this book tour, it's touching people. They are, I think they're moved by it. And it comes at a time when our history is being challenged, as you know, I mean, you all are the keeper of Reagan's legacy here in many ways. That legacy, all historic legacies, I think are being eroded a little bit each day. It's our obligation to push back on that and find new ways to introduce people, I think, to these great lives. Because look, and they're not saints. Nobody, when I walked in, I noticed Ronald Reagan had a cowboy hat on. He did not have a halo, and that's fine. Typical for Edison. He's not a saint. He did, you know, pretty horrible things later in life with some of his competitors. He was a tough businessman. That's part of the deal. The story I'm focusing on, though, is a child who was discarded and pushed aside, like so many. And our educational system is so rigid, it doesn't always allow people who think outside the box. And Edison thought way outside the box. He was creating new boxes, and it threatened a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, you know, President Reagan often said that an education isn't just in the classroom, it's in the home. And what his mother did for him just epitomizes that completely.
Saved his life.
So I think my last question on the family read portion is, with your Christmas or holiday books, with these books, are you finding that you're solving an untapped area of journalism? Do you think there are family reads out there that are beloved?
Well, you know, I think there are a few moments, there are a few things that families can gather around together at the same time and enjoy together. So my real conceit in all of this, whether it's the Christmas books or these books or the Will Wilder books, I really want a meeting of the generations. That's what I'm trying to do, to get mothers and fathers and grandparents and and uncles and aunts to sit with that child and share their own experience. What happens after they close the book is just as important as whatever I put between the pages. Because I think that interaction, you know, when I was a child, we had the Carol Burnett show, we had sitcoms, we had different things that we all gathered together. I remember spending time with my parents and my grandparents and my great-grandmother who lived with us. That knowledge, the wisdom I got from that experience are things I treasure to this day. I mean, they shaped my life the way Edison's mother shaped his. And so this book is partly a reminder to adults that you have an obligation to recognize and try to see beyond even what the external appearance presents, the possibilities of that child, and to nurture those possibilities, and to defend and advocate for that child, even when it means confronting a professor in the classroom who's saying, this kid is not good enough, too dumb. Get out. Nancy Edison had the moxie to stand up and the devotion to her child to say, no, I know what he's capable of, and I'm going to at least allow him to try to be who I think he is. So.
Now, yes. So the story, the words, are fabulous, but I also have to say the illustrations are stunning. So can you talk about Christina?
Christina Gehrman, it's very interesting. You know, look, people always say, oh, it must be easy. You're cranking these out, Raymond. Well, let me stop you. Slow your roll. It takes me 4 to 6 months to do research on a book like this. This is not something I write off the top of my head, because you must know much more than you could possibly put into 19 flips. And when you're dealing with family reads, picture books, you only get 19 turns of the page. That's all you have. That's a very limited amount of time to tell a story. So to me, they're like mini movies. These are like storyboards for a movie. So as I'm writing it, I'm also writing a description of what I think I want to see in that spread. And you give the artist a kind of notion of what you'd like to see. Now, once it goes to her, in this case, Christina Gehrman, like this first spread, I love the idea that Edison was born in a windowless attic. This dark place. So the first words are, as a baby, little Al Edison slept in a dark, windowless attic, but there was light within him. And I love the idea of him, and she came up with this idea of him reaching for the little candlelight in the corner of the room. So again, she's telling you things that I now don't have to say. This was once a paragraph down here. I sliced a lot of that away because your picture begins to tell more than half of the line. So it's a dance. It's a real collaboration. And no matter who I'm working with, you send them your script, your manuscript, and then a description, and many times they will send back a sketch that improves what you originally saw, and sometimes consolidates it, and I'll cut tons of copy. So it becomes an editing exercise at the end. But you're really, like you said, I love, so many people have told me, oh, I didn't know this about Edison. I didn't know he did this as a man. I didn't know he did this as a child. I want to surprise you and keep a story narrative. And to do that and have a story arc in 19 flips is a challenge.
Well, and that was going to be
but she did a beautiful job.
And that was literally going to be my next question. So you've sort of answered this in bits and pieces throughout the other questions, but the process of researching this book, the process of writing this book, because you're telling such an important story in 19 flips. So, and the research is vast. So how do you go about that research and narrowing it down?
Well, that's hard. I stand back because of my training. My background was in the theater. So look, I was trained to, when you do your research, and I would do research as an actor, you delve deeply into this character, but there are only a certain amount of things that you can play. Okay? So you're really looking for clues of what can you actually put, what behavior can you put on, what can you show that reveals much more than you can possibly say. And I think the same way as I approach this material. I'm looking for tells, character tells. So I'll give you an example. When I went to the Edison lab in West Orange, which is incredible. It's a vast place. If you go on my social media, go to Raymond Arroyo on Twitter or my Facebook account, I did all these little videos in the process of doing a special for Fox and my research, and took you into the archives and into the Vatican. Sorry, forgive me, slip of the tongue, into the Edison labs. It was like the Vatican for me, I have to tell you. And in fact, I told the archivist when I went in, I'm like, this place is like holy to me. Because once you read a life and you spend so much time with that person, to walk in, and the Edison labs, he died in 1931. The family gave the entire laboratory that he built and spent 44 years in to the federal government. It is one of the most intact national parks in the system, and it's really worth visiting. It blew my mind. It's untouched. You walk in, and it's like the turn of the century. And his office has all the clutter and the stuff it had on it in 1931. There are racks with his vests and his hats, his bowler hats in the corner. It's incredible. The cot he slept on in between experiments is in the corner. Really cool. But a long wind up to say, I went into the archive and I found, and they showed me, the sketch that Thomas Edison made of the phonograph, the very first one. It's a crude drawing with a stylus and a cylinder and a horn. But I said, my gosh, where did this come from? This idea of thinking visually and working this out. Well, it came from his childhood. When he was 5 years old, he would walk around town with little notebooks and sketch the signs he saw and the things that fascinated him. So he was always working in some ways with his eyes, with his hands, and working his way through problems. That is really the mark of not only Edison as a boy, but Edison as an inventor. So I'm looking for those little character tells. He was also, and I'll tie Christina Gehrman to this, my illustrator, I later found out, she is deaf. She can't hear at all. Thomas Edison, at 12 years old, was deaf. He lost his hearing. There are lots of news reels of him with his ear, and people are literally yelling at him, and they're right here. And when he would record people for the phonograph, record musical acts, there's a big ear horn next to his chair at the Edison Music Room, upstairs in the lab, and it's pressed right against the horn of the phonograph. That's the only way he could hear. And later in life, he would actually get a board. This is cool. I know that you didn't ask this question,
no, please.
But it's I love this stuff. He had a board, and the hearing was almost totally gone. And he put the board under the phonograph, and he would bite down on it like a cochlear implant, and the sound would reverberate through his skull, because that's the only way he could hear fine vibrations at a certain age. Brilliant guy. This is a century ago. So the vision of Thomas Edison, again, the light, the book is The Unexpected Light of Thomas Alva Edison. Not only was it unexpected, it is iridescent, it continues to glow. to this very moment. We are beneficiaries of his creation all around us.
Right. You keep talking that this is a series.
It is.
Are you allowed to share with us who might be next?
You know, I wasn't going to share with you, but now I can.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I'm like Barack Obama. Yes, we can. I'm trying to bring everybody in. We got Ronald Reagan and Edison. Now I'm bringing Obama in. The next book, this is, as I said, Turnabout Tales, and it's a moment of crisis in these young lives. The next book, and I kind of just tipped it off, Edison on the train as a boy met Abraham Lincoln. The next book in the series is The Marvelous Mischief of Tad Lincoln, who is Abraham Lincoln's youngest son. And he's an ignored part of history. People don't spend a lot of time talking about him or even thinking about poor Tad. He gets lost in the shuffle. But he's the last son of Abraham Lincoln. He is the son that Lincoln clings to during the Civil War. He is tied to a very important national tradition that I don't want to ruin by talking about now. But, and he is there at key moments, including pardoning of soldiers, the Emancipation Proclamation, and the year a national holiday is established. All of that Tad Lincoln is not only privy to, but party to. And I'm going to tell that story next. It's about the importance of a child in a parent's life. So it's kind of an inverse turnabout tale, where the child it's not the parent who is needed in this story so much as the child was needed for the parent. So it's kind of cool. So that's next. But look, I hope to preserve these lives because there are wonderful lessons for us. I believe every one of these stories, history, is a roadmap for living. It teaches us how to live better, and it warns us where not to go. And if you don't look at that history and at least recognize what went before, like Edison, you can't surpass what went before if you don't know what it was. And you can't learn what to avoid in the future if you don't know what was. So I'm trying to keep these vibrant, fun, important characters in the public eye and hopefully in a lot of young hearts.
So we're going to do audience Q&A now. We just ask that you raise your hands. We have microphones. We want to make sure that we capture your question for the cameras in the back. So if anyone has a question, raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone. There's a question over here.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Elaine McKern, and I have been trying for the last 30 years to get good books into our schools. I was on the school board back in 94 to 98.
Wow.
This is my daughter, Heather. She's Down syndrome. They isolated her. I fought for her in the schools. They included her then, and then they isolated her. And then I said, that's it. I'm going to take her where she needs to go. But I appreciate this book. She loves her Christmas book, the Three Wise Men. She's got this one here already.
Oh.
We couldn't come and sit down here without her getting it.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Heather, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Heather, for
she
coming.
She was here when she was 8. She's now 38.
Wow.
And I helped open this. So.
Well, thank God she had a good mama who advocated for her and loves her enough to do so. God bless you. I mean, that is really... And you don't know, ma'am, the number of Elaine, close. Elaine, you don't know the number of mothers who come up to me and say, this is my story. They told me my child couldn't be taught, and he's now a professor at MIT. You know, because they don't know what to do with these crackling minds or people who perceive things differently. But the educational system today is just not built to accommodate. It's a one-size-fits-all. We have to get out of that. Somehow we have to get out of it. But thank God for parents like you who are advocating and fighting for your child, which is what we all have to do. Yes, ma'am. Or sir. Sir.
My question is this. You know, you've talked about Thomas Edison's mother and the impact she had on him. How did your mother, your own mother, shape your life and your work?
Great question.
You're going to make me cry. I dedicate this book to my mother and my wife because both of them, my wife advocated and is an incredible, has been the most incredible mother to our children. And she, like my friend Carrie, who's here, and so many other mothers, They're with their children, and they're so close to those children. They know how they move and how they think and how they learn. And you have to, every one of my children learn differently. 3 of them, 3 different modes of learning, 3 different schools. They didn't all go to one school because they learn differently. And Rebecca taught me one child does not set the benchmark for the other, and nor should they. They're their own people. And our job is to allow those people to flourish and create whole people, intact people, and good citizens. That's what we're here to do. She did that beautifully, my wife, and she still does. We have a 17-year-old still in the house. The others are finally loosed on the world. Good luck to you all. In the case of my mother, Linda, who was such a, the same thing. My mother read to me constantly. I'll tell you the other thing, and we didn't get into this. I didn't even think about this till I was talking the other day. When I was in 2nd grade, and this may be why this story stuck in my craw and I had to write it. Edison, remember, was thrown out of school in 2nd grade. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a nun. Her name was Sister Agnes. Sister Agnes and I had a little disagreement because you're going to have trouble imagining this. When I was younger, I talked a lot. What are you laughing about? What's so funny? Nothing funny there. But I was a chatterbox. I'd finish my work because it was easy for me. So I'd finish the thing, close it, and I was turning and talking to Jennifer behind me. I remember her to this day. And all the kids around me and telling jokes and stuff. Nothing like I am today. Nothing at all. And this sister did not like the Raymond show at all. And she would say, Mr. Arroyo, come here. And I came up, she put your hands on the table. I won't go into the whole story, but she pulled out the typical ruler, and it got ugly. Not for me, for her. And I'm not going to tell the story because I'm saving it for the one-man show, but I will just say it ended spectacularly, and I was thrown out of her class. She would not let me back in the classroom. So they sent me to a 4th grade class where I finished out 2nd grade. But that 4th grade teacher loved me and understood that I was kind of a wild kid, and she gave me things to do, and I excelled. And I was doing 4th grade work and 2nd grade work. It was fine. But my mother fought for me through all that period and defended me. And my grandmother, you know, I've always had these great, incredible women in my life. My grandmother, who took me to the theater when I was a kid, because my grandfather had a restaurant in New Orleans and would never go with her, couldn't go with her. So I got to see Yul Brynner and Carol Channing and Ethel Merman and Richard Burton and Rex Harrison in front of me in the 3rd row as a 10 and 11-year-old, and Frank Sinatra. And I mean, I saw all these people, and they shaped my life and changed my life. But for her, none of that would have happened. So the power of a parent who loves you, who understands you and loves you, is a very important thing. I was in Angola prison a few weeks ago with some friends who were working on a project. I wasn't sent there. I went to do a project. And though some would like me to go to Angola prison and just, you know, throw the key away. But I went in and I met a guy on death row working in the welding shop. They gave him a few hours to work in the welding shop. And he passed his certification. He was so proud. Big guy. Huge. And I said, tell me, how did you get the certification? He said, well, the warden's husband helped me. He gave me books and he helped me. And he was tough on me. And he said, I'm going to treat you like my son. Now, this is a big man, 35 years old, 38 years old, 6'4", huge guy, crying in the welding shop. And he said, it was the first time anybody loved me like a father or a mother. And he sat next to me when I took the certification exam. And he was like my angel there. And I had someone who loved me. And he treated me like his son. And I thought, my God, if this guy had had a father or a mother who cared, he probably wouldn't be here on death row. So the power of parents, it's all a reminder. And Nancy Edison, for me, just brings it full circle. And I hope others understand it too. Important. My thanks to Melissa Giller, John Highbush, and all the folks at the Reagan Library for making us feel so at home, as well as all those who turned out. The Unexpected Life of Thomas Alva Edison, the first in the Turnabout Tales series, is available at bookstores everywhere and online. It makes a wonderful Easter gift, and in many ways, it is the story of a family resurrecting one of its members and speaks to the sacrifice sometimes necessary to do so. I also want to announce a little giveaway. I am going to be giving an entire school, a class, free copies of The Unexpected Light of Thomas Alva Edison, and I may even give away a few of these commemorative light bulbs, which are apparently going to be banned soon. If you go to my social media sites, to Facebook and Twitter, I'm posting the link there. If you repost that and answer in the replies why you think I should come to your school, you may be chosen as the site of my next visit. You can go to RaymondArroyo.com for all those details, and of course check out my social media. And the book is available at the EWTN Religious Catalog and wherever books are sold.